Welcome to the Digital Transformist. This is Mike LaVista. Today we have Danny Brassell. Danny and I have worked together to improve my own speaking and creating webinar content and all kinds of other great stuff. He's got some really valuable advice for anyone that wants to create a better story, get on stage and speak and kind of grow and develop your brand and your company through that avenue. So it's really, really good stuff. Let's jump right in. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Digital Transformist. I'm Mike LaVista, and a lot of times people say, like, I'm really excited to have someone on who they've never met, and I'm really excited to have someone on who I actually have met before. And funny enough, we connected through a podcast matching platform, and like, wait a second, I know that guy. So this should be pretty entertaining because as we'll get into it, not only do I know him, but I've actually taken and used his content. And so I want you to welcome Danny Brassell to the podcast. Hello, Danny. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Mike. It's such a joy to be with you again. And thanks for spreading some joy and knowledge around the world. We need a lot more of you.
Yeah. Well, so the idea that we had to talk about today as we kind of blend our two worlds here is that a lot of what I've been talking about with others and kind of creating our own content has been around, usually it's technology and process innovation, especially in the last year or two, on ideas around artificial intelligence and how one can use them. And I'm sure we've all played with it. So let's start with, so we're going to get there. That's my endpoint. That's the teaser. Let's start with, so who is Danny Brassell and what amazing things can he bring to the world of creating content and, webinars and all that kind of stuff? Catch us up on kind of what you're all about.
Well, if I was going to write an autobiography, I'd probably call it Pivots because I pivoted many times in my life. 30 years ago, I was a reporter, got to cover President Bush Sr. in the 1992 presidential election, and I had a great job, got to meet every editor of every major daily. And one editor offered me the city beat for $16,500 a year. Meanwhile, a friend told me that they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became an educator for the noblest of reasons, for the high pay.
Oh my God.
And turns out I fell in love with teaching. I've actually taught all age levels from preschoolers all the way up to rocket scientists. I can make that claim because I used to teach English as a second language to engineering students at the University of Southern California. And then in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything overnight. And I could focus on all the negatives, but I'm a positive person, and I learned so many things. First of all, my wife is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer, and she stuck right by me. She's an incredible human being. Second of all, money's no longer the end all be all for me because I learned you can lose money just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people because if I was somebody who saw what I did, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize if you don't know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became a Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to admit, but the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, I didn't want to declare bankruptcy. And my accountant said, well, you have to make this much more money this year to avoid that. And so I started speaking on the side and I hit that number right on the number. Well, then the next year, Mike, he gave me a much higher number and I hit that number right on the number. So in year three, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And basically, during one of the worst economic downturns in American history, I was able to build up a highly lucrative speaking business, which was rolling along great until 2020 when a thing called COVID occurred. And people ask, well, how's your speaking business? I'm like, oh, it's great. How the world just shut down overnight and I lost 200 speaking engagements. It's been great. And so for years, people have been asking me to teach them how to speak. And I always resisted coaching because I've always had a very high standard as a teacher. I actually will not let you fail. I will stick on you until you succeed. Well, working with primarily entrepreneurs and business owners and executives, I find that they're highly motivated and they do the work. And it's been probably the most gratifying thing I've ever done. So that's a very long answer to your short question,
Yeah.
but that's what made me the coach that you got to experience coaching you on how to put together a well-crafted presentation.
Well, we only allow long answers here on the podcast. That's all I do as well. I hear you on that. So there's a kind of a buried headline that I'd love to hear you tease out a little bit, which is, you went from not speaking and having this kind of gap to make the your bankruptcy number, to all of a sudden speaking. And so I think for a lot of us, honestly in the consulting world, that sounds like a great avenue for us. I'd love to do more of that. Tell us the story of your first stage how you got there, how it went. I hope it went bad, by the way, because
Oh,
being
they
good on
always
the
do.
first one really annoyed me. But like, tell us how that started. Let's start there.
Well, my first stage was teaching middle school and high school students. They looked at me like
Okay.
I was a nothing, and that's what made me a better speaker. I mean, and what really made me a better speaker was teaching kindergarten because I call that New York, New York. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere because they have about a 7 minute attention span. And so I always, and I coached you on this is that the riches are in the niches, and the easiest way to start speaking is to find whatever your lowest hanging fruit is, which is generally whatever your expertise is or the clubs and organizations you belong to. And so when I first broke out, I started training teachers, and then I started working with parents, and then I started working with school administrators. And then I was in a mastermind with a common friend of ours. And one of the guys in the mastermind was a very successful salesman, had, makes 100 million a year. And he asked me to train his sales force. And I looked at him, I'm like, I have no experience training a sales force. And he looked at me like I was an idiot. He's like, Danny, if you can get teenage, middle school, adolescent
Yes.
kids in the inner city to read Shakespeare, I'm pretty sure you can motivate my sales force.
Right.
And he did me a huge favor because it got me expanding my viewpoint. And that was actually really a turning point in my life. I'm like, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that you're teaching the people on your podcast is expand those horizons.
Yeah. Well, so when you say you started speaking that year, so you started speaking at schools. That was your first foray into getting paid to do this kind of thing.
No, so you wanted to hear the failure story. So here's a good failure story. So
Yeah.
I think my official first like presentation as a speaker, I was speaking at the California Reading Association in Sacramento, and
Okay.
the title of my talk was the effects of increased book access on homeless Latino preschoolers. And it
Okay.
sounds like a great title, and not a single person showed up. And so I did my presentation for the janitor.
Okay.
He seemed to like it, and a year later, I had the same presentation, but I titled it "Free Balloons," and I had a whole bunch of people show up. And so I learned the essence of marketing.
Okay.
That's very important. But you're right. I always tell people that you got to fall on your face before you get better. And I mean, it's just like your
Absolutely.
podcast. I guarantee you, the first time you did your podcast, Mike, you stunk. The
Yep.
second time you did it, you stunk, but you stunk a little bit less than the first
Yeah.
time. And now you've been doing it so long, it's a finely oiled machine, and it's no problem. But speaking is just like any other skill; it can be trained, but you need to work at it.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about then. So, if, full disclosure, I took your program on how to build a talk, which I turned into how to build a webinar talk. And so, if anyone saw my talk with Mark Baldino a month or two ago, that was based on an outline that was stole directly from Danny, or used part of the class. So, maybe as kind of an intro to that, let's talk about maybe where you see the value for people who are maybe listening. So, for targeting, CEOs of growing companies, how might speaking serve their business? And then we can kind of get into like how you might go build that idea that you go talk about.
Yeah, especially with your audience, like CEOs. I mean, not only is it the fastest way to build up your business, it's also the fastest way to really build up camaraderie and teamwork. I mean, a lot of the companies I've been working for, they're having a huge attrition rate in employees, and so it's a great way to engage your employees on a common vision to get
Hmm.
them not to want to leave your company. I've always said that an effective presentation, it doesn't rest on if a lot of people are applauding you or if a lot of people are saying you're a great speaker. The only way I monitor the effectiveness of a presentation is how many people in your audience are deciding to take the next step. So the next step, it
Sure.
could be an unpaid next step, like
Yeah.
subscribe to my podcast, or book a phone call with me. It can be a paid offer, like buy my product or invest in my coaching program. But this is how we rate the effect. I mean, so your webinar, I would look at how many people registered for the webinar, how many people attended the webinar, and of those people, how many people decided to take you up on your offer. That's the way we're going to
Hmm.
establish the effectiveness of your presentation. And then I love to work with people on how do we get those numbers up.
Okay, interesting. It's funny. So for us, we were really. I'll disclose. We were just under 50% took a next step, which I thought was amazing. I was hoping for one. you know, and it turned out to be pretty good. So we got lucky with the message maybe, and it connected at the right time. It's funny, one of the places I thought you were going briefly there was, as a leader, you have stages you speak on, but I wonder, can some of this apply to just like, you're doing, when you do an all hands meeting, even if it's not, you're not publicized, you're not on TV, but you're in front of, your team, as you said, to kind of convey the message. Do you think those same principles apply there?
Absolutely. I was working with a young CEO who's about 35 years old, and most of the people working for him are in their 40s and 50s, and some in their 60s.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what to do to get the people on board with his vision for the company. And so we worked on his presentation, his very first talk to the all hands on deck. And he
Yeah.
talked about starting out in that company because it's a family owned company. His father had passed it down to him. And he basically talked about all the menial jobs he had to do and how he had to learn all those things. And what he saw was a lot of nods, like people relating to him. And it's really one of the most important things. I always tell people, Brene Brown, she's a wonderful speaker. She talks about sharing your vulnerabilities. And I completely agree with her. The biggest mistake I see most people make in presentations is they talk about their successes.
Mm.
Stop doing that. Start talking about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed, especially if you're the CEO. You got to get down, you got to lower yourself down to their level. Like, it might be your grand vision is to increase the company's revenue from 1 billion to 2 billion, and you love that vision. Well, you need to connect with your audience on why they need to connect with that
Sure.
vision, because it might not be so important to them. They don't have stock options, they don't have the vested
Yeah.
stake. So, how do you relate to your audience? I mean, and that's what we work on at the beginning of it. To me, I always say you got to rap. There's three things you got to do in the first 5 minutes. You got to show that you're relatable. You're just like them. You got to show your authority. You understand where they're coming from and you've solved the problem that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And you got to show your purpose, which is why this is important to you and to them.
Yeah, it's funny. I gotta say, because I know we start off, as you suggested, we start off our talk with a story of like just historic collapse of like really like messing something up, and it makes you nervous to start there, but you realize when you're doing it, even as you're saying it, it's like, this is the I've been there, and keep in mind that was in the past, and that's how we learned about how to get to here, and I feel like one of the things I've learned over the years doing consulting is, part of it is, um, understanding the mistakes that you can make sometimes just takes years. That's the advantage of someone who's been doing it, 20 years versus 2 years. It's like, oh yeah, that one, I did that one. Oh, that problem. Yeah, we did that 10 years ago. And then we've built up sort of a repertoire of things that we've overcome. And all of a sudden, we can come in and fix it right away. And there's that old joke about, you have a plumber come in who can't fix it, spends all day. Another guy comes in and looks at it, taps the thing, and it works. And it's like, it's $1,000 bill. You were here 5 minutes. He goes, yeah, you paid for 20 years experience, not the 5 minutes. And so that kind of idea, I think that I've tried to pull that forward. It's not always easy, but that I know people have been doing things for a long time. You've got a real angle on the expert way to do it, and sometimes it just takes all those failures. Um,
Yeah, what I like about what you just said, Mike, is the element of time. I mean, it's one thing if you were in prison, it's another thing if you got out of prison yesterday. I mean, there's a time element.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, so maybe let's tease up a little bit of kind of what the method is to your madness around building a good talk. Yeah, don't give away the whole thing, but like enough to say like, hey, if this sounds interesting, maybe I should call Danny up. But like, give us a little taste of the structure of what you do and what it's like to build a compelling presentation with you.
Yeah, so what I call it, we're creating a well-crafted story. Politicians would call it a stump speech. In superhero movies, they call it an origin story. You can call it peanut butter and jelly. What I'm teaching people how to do is how to create a presentation that you're going to deliver again and again to introduce yourself to new audiences. And so our process, I work with my two co-founders, Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson and Dave Ward. I call us the professor, the performer, and the producer because I come from an academic background. Jimmy comes from Broadway, and then Dave was an attorney. And we have our process is what we call the 5 C's process. And I'll just list them very quickly. A good speech begins with clarity, and you have to connect with your audience, teach content, have a very clear call to action, and then have a close that connects emotionally with people. And so before we write one word of a presentation, the first thing I did, and we did this, you and I did this together, is there's two questions you have to answer. If you can answer these questions, you're in good shape. But 95% of the people I work with are not clear on the two answers to these questions. Those questions are, who is your audience? And we already discussed this. The riches are in the niches. You know, when I hear people say, "Oh, I serve everybody," I'm like, "Well, if you're trying to serve everybody, you're serving nobody."
Right.
You know, and it's all right to expand your audience. I mean, I already gave you the example. I went from working with teachers to the parents to the principals to then I started working with sales companies and things like that. But you really should start with the lowest hanging fruit. You know, so if your background is in you run a technology company, well then
Yeah.
talk to technology companies. You're very comfortable with that audience. You're probably much more comfortable talking to technology companies to fitness centers. And so you have to understand who is your audience. The second question you have to ask yourself is, what is the problem that I solve? Now, so many people I work with, they don't really understand the problem they solve because they keep on advertising it based on the solution. And
Mm.
you gotta switch that. So, for example, when I'm working with personal finance, like financial advisors, they'll say, "Well, we help people secure a good retirement." Well, that's not actually a problem. That's a good thing. Maybe the problem that you solve is that you have enough money until the day you die. Um, if I'm working with fitness, and now I got fitness instructors in my head, a fitness instructor, if they say, "Oh, I'm teaching people a healthy lifestyle," well, a healthy lifestyle is a good thing. You know, maybe what the problem you're solving is keeping people from obesity.
Yeah.
So if you can answer those two questions, then you understand your purpose and everything, and now we can put together the presentation.
That's such a good take. I know that for me, the big change in my business was I talked about what we did because I was like it's a technology company. I started as like a programmer, and so I was like, oh, if we can do something, we should talk about what we do, and we did that. We That's how we talked about the company forever. And all of a sudden, the slightest glimmer of a light bulb came on. Like, oh, if we talked about the problems we solved, that'd be a lot better. And so we've backed it up. And so my version of that is, I have this idea that broken systems make people quit and customers leave. And so
Mm.
if we can come in and we can fix your systems, it just so happens that what we're doing is some process mining, process engineering, and then software and AI and some other things. But the thing we're fixing is your broken systems are going to make your people and your customers leave. And that is I think, a universal truth. We've all encountered a thing that doesn't work. In fact, my wife was on
Yeah.
a website that shall remain nameless, uh, where they had a bridal registry that just does not work. And ordered the same thing 3 times because it didn't seem like it was working. And then when it shipped, wasn't sure where it was. And she's like, "You should call these guys." And so I did today. We'll see if they call me back. But like that's the thing. Like nobody wants to use that system. And but if you start with technology as your hammer and you just go around hitting nails, you're not going to actually solve anything. So that I feel like I learned that lesson the hard way. Again, that's a mistake I made doing that too long. But I
But
think you're right.
that's
That's
how we
the
learn is from the
Yeah.
mistakes. Yeah.
So tell me, how about a success you had flipping someone from that old mindset to the new mindset? What did that how did that go, and then what doors did that open up for them?
Well, I mean, everything, you know, of all people, it was Joseph Stalin who said a million people dead is a statistic, one person dead is a tragedy.
Yeah.
The translation is that stories inform, or excuse me, statistics inform, but stories transform. Facts tell, stories sell. And so we were working with a financial planner a few months ago, Richard, and Richard used to start off his presentation like, "Oh, I've been in the business for 30 years. I've made over $1 billion for my clients. I worked with this famous person, this famous person." I said, "Time out, Richard. You know, what are the three most important elements of real estate? Location, location, location. It's all right to brag, but you're doing it in the wrong part of your
Hmm.
presentation." And so we changed his talk. So now he starts by talking about the very first client that he ever booked 30 years ago. And it's this hilarious story, a comedy of errors. I have no idea why this person invested their money with Richard, but this was the thing that was interesting. So the way he gets clients is like twice a week he'll have these informational sessions, like it's a free steak dinner at a nice steak restaurant for about 15 50-year-old couples. And he said that when he used to do these presentations, the husband usually has his arms crossed, like, what's he trying to sell me? How much is it going to cost? Now that he leads with the story, the same guy is patting his knee. He's laughing so hard at the story. and which is great. But here's how we look at the effectiveness of the presentation. Richard said that he used to get about 6 of the 15 couples to do a follow-up call to learn more about his services. Now he's averaging 12 of the 15 couples are actually booking that call. And it's because they connected. They saw something in him. And that's really where and this is what I get excited about is, I had a guy, Gustavo, about 18 months ago. Gustavo should be president of the United States, Mike. Gustavo came to America 30 years ago from Ecuador, didn't speak a word of English, did every menial job, saved every dime, invested in real estate. 30 years later, he's worth about $40 million. And so we were putting together his offer. And his offer, you'll love this one, Mike. I do a lot of offers with people. His offer was he teaches this real estate coaching program. It's a 4-month program for $40,000. Now, I work on a lot of offers, Mike. That's a very high ticket offer. But I told him exactly what I tell everybody. I'm like, hey, you get better 2 ways at speaking. You watch lots of speakers, and you got to do your reps. And I said, even the smallest towns in America have a Lions Club, an Optimist Club, a Rotary Club, a
Mm,
Kiwanis Club. They got schools, they got churches, synagogues, temples, chambers of commerce. Got to get out there speaking. And he mentioned he was going on a podcast that night. I'm like, there you go. There's your audience. Okay. So
mhm,
here's my phone number. You got to call me tomorrow, Gustavo. Make the pitch. Tell me how it goes. He calls me the next day, Mike. He's all excited. He's like, Danny, you're a genius. I'm like, did you go on the podcast? He's like, yes. I'm like, did you make the pitch? He's like, yes. I'm like, did you sell any? He's like, 23.
hmm,
Mike,
okay.
reading's my specialty, not math. But if I'm doing my math correctly, he made $920,000 that night on an offer we had put together that afternoon. Since then, he's made 8 figures. And I don't tell the story because of all of his financial success. That's wonderful. I tell the story because he did the work. Most people don't do the work. How many of your friends said that they're going to start a podcast? They never start a podcast
Yeah.
because they don't do anything. I
Yeah.
can't stand being around people that don't do anything. And this is what I push people. Hey, get out there, do it, fall flat on your face, get back up, do it again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great story. I mean, that's the kind of story that we all dream of doing, right? And I think
Yeah.
honestly, I think the thing is there are so many people that are so smart and have such great things to offer, and the lever they could provide to a business or whatever is so great, and yet the offer is sort of squishy or not understandable and doesn't really have an irresistibility to it. It just sort of and it passes by. And getting that right up front, I think, is such an incredible multiplier. And honestly, we're always searching for art. I always want to improve ours as well because
Mhm.
we haven't booked the like I said, we had half our people respond, but it was a free offer, so I gotta up my skills there. But I'm Gustavo, good for you. I'm really proud of you. Would love to meet you and hear about that. That's really great. Well, so let's talk about, so now I'm finally going to bring in some AI here. In the last few years, we all went from never hearing about ChatGPT to maybe I should try this out to lots of people experimenting right now. And in our business, a lot of what I end up talking to clients about is, a lot of this is good and a lot of this is hype, and we need to sort out what's going to work for you. There's certain things that, and again, we're talking about the world of LLM. So, we do all kinds of AI. That's a subsection, right? And there's things it's going to do really, really well and things it's going to fall flat on its face about, and it's going to lie and hallucinate and all that kind of stuff. But there's some things it's great about. And I'm curious for your business and for your clients as you work on content. I know we use it for ideation here. What have been some of the successes in your world bringing in something like a ChatGPT type facility?
Yeah, I mean, I love AI. I always encourage everybody. People fear technology. I'm like, technology is not to be feared. Technology is to be utilized. There's all
Mm,
kinds of positive purposes. I mean, there's 2 types of AI. There's artificial intelligence, and then there's authentic intelligence. Authentic
mm,
intelligence will never be replaced. And the thing I love about AI is we've learned that today the solutions aren't what matters. What matters are the questions. What's the input that you're giving to the AI? That's how you're going to get the output that you
yeah,
want. And most people are just familiar with Chat GPT, but there's so many other different engines out. I mean, I use Chat GPT, but I also use Claude. And people always ask me, why do I use Claude? I'm like, I don't know, and I can't prove this, but for some reason, when I create projects in Claude, um, with all of my writing, Claude does a better job of really replicating my voice in other communications. And ChatGPT is excellent. I use ChatGPT a lot for brainstorming ideas and things like that. But by all means, I always tell people you should. I use ChatGPT. I got in an argument with my wife, and I wrote an apology letter, and it didn't sound the way I wanted to. So I sent it to ChatGPT. I'm like, can you make me sound a little bit more positive? And let's just say it worked.
Wow. Note to self: we're going to edit that out, right? No,
Yeah.
that's great. It's funny because we noticed that too, and so a lot of what we do here is, there, like you said, there are a lot of different engines out there,
Mhm.
including some open source ones, and some seem to be better at other kinds of things than the other ones. And so, like, we have one that we really like for math, we have one that we like a little bit better for voice, and one better for long form, and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So that's a lot of what we have to navigate right now. And I think the world of what we might call sort of proper AI, where you're actually training something, like really training something on your own models. Some of that went away from with LLMs, but some of it didn't. And I know that that'll be hard to unpack over the next couple of years. But right now, this is sucking all the air out of the room for AI. So I like it for ideation. Coming back to your world a little bit, when I think of like how we do content, frankly, it's hey, give me we did some content that performed pretty well because I was commenting on the Jensen Hong NVIDIA keynote speech,
Mhm.
and just say, hey, give me 21 ideas on things I could say, and of the 21, three were no, don't say that. A couple were
Mhm.
okay, and then but I, as an editor, and I think I'm collecting all your sort of Brassellisms here, but the artificial intelligence and authentic intelligence, I hope you
Mhm.
trademark that. Like someone coming in and like that's the value. That's where because the LMs are going to get you sort of the middle of the bell curve. It's going to be fine, but you're going to have to come in and tweak it up. And I wonder, so your apology letter is hilarious and great, but have you used it, experimented with it in the actual speech content and others? Like, tell me about your experiences there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually show clients when I'm coaching. I'm like, well, here, let's take the elements, and so we have a chatbot that we created
Yeah,
called Peggy because uh, Dave and Jimmy and I all love Mad Men, and Peggy always does all the work. So
sure.
Peggy's our chatbot, and so Peggy understands the structure, the 5C structure, and
Yep.
so then we'll input it with a person's background. If they have a website, we'll input the website, any things that they have ever written, and we'll ask for specific types of story. So this is the big thing with storytelling is your story has to have a purpose. And so, for example, Kathy, I was working with a few weeks ago. Kathy's got the best niche on the planet. She creates saddles for professional polo players. I've never heard of a niche like that.
Yeah.
And I asked her, I'm like, so how much money you make doing that, Kathy? And she's like, last year about $800,000. If you just heard a noise, it's because my jaw just dropped the floor. I need
Yeah.
to learn how to make saddles for
Or
polo
no,
players.
right? Yeah.
Unbelievable. There's something for everybody. But she
Yeah.
was having a difficult time with her call to action, which was a
Mhm.
paid call to action to hire her. And so she needed to hire an expert story. And so that's where your personal stories are important. So
Hmm.
I demonstrated to her, I'm like, okay, so what you want to do is without explicitly telling people that they should hire you to sell their saddles to, you need to show them a hire an expert story. So I'll give a demonstration. So
Yeah.
I'm like, at the end of a presentation, I'll say, I'll leave you with this. Many years ago, my wife and I had theater tickets and we were dressed to the nines, driving to the theater, so excited when we got a flat tire. My wife said, well, I'll call AAA. I'm like, you don't have to call AAA. I'm a man. I can fix a flat tire. So I opened up the trunk and I got out the spare tire, and then I got out the pumper thing and the thing shaped like the X to take out the nuts and the bolts off the uh, the tire. And basically 27 minutes later, I had grease all over my hands. I was filthy. My wife was looking at me, shaking her head like I could have done so much better than this guy. Well, unbeknownst to me, she'd actually already called AAA, and this tow truck shows up, and some 17-year-old punk jumps out of the tow truck, and
Yep.
in 3 minutes flat fixes my flat tire. You know, I think there are times in life when all of us think we can do it ourselves, but if you want
Yeah.
to save time, you want to save money, and you want to save a whole lot of headache and embarrassment, you hire an expert.
Yeah.
And so this is how you create a story that's actually going to tell the point. And so I would feed something like that into ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and ChatGPT is awesome. I'll say, okay, give me 5 examples of hire an expert stories that are
Right.
similar in tune. And then and then maybe I'm dissatisfied with them. Like, that's not very humorous. Can you do it in a more humorous way? Because I like to tend, I think humor is one of the best ways to connect with audiences. And this is where I'm excited about AI. And I know you've seen this too, Mike, because in the last 2 years, it's getting better. It's
Mhm.
learning. And I always thought, oh, I'm secure forever because I add humor, and AI doesn't understand humor.
Right.
Well, it's starting to understand humor.
Maybe.
I'm getting better and better results the more I talk to it, and so that's what we'll do with or crafting a better offer. I mean, if you're only getting 50% on a free offer, you're not doing it right. We can get that number up
Oh,
pretty.
okay,
I
great.
mean, we should definitely be getting you up to 80 to
Okay.
85% for sure. I mean, for me, you were doing a webinar, but for a live presentation, I can get 125% on a free
Oh,
offer. And people always ask, well, how do you do that? I'm like, well, how do you invade a small country? By land, by air, by sea? How do you get people to do your offers? So I have a QR code. So maybe 10 to 15% of my audience, they understand that you just point your phone at the QR code, it'll take you to the website. I also have the website listed. So maybe another 20 to
yeah.
30% of the people, they're able to type in the website. But what really works for me is I have contact cards on every single seat where I just ask for a name, an email, and sometimes I'll ask for a cell phone, but not always. The more you ask, you're going to have a lower percentage of the people fill it out. But a friend of mine, he always brags that he gets 100% of the contact cards back. And I'm like, well, you're underperforming. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I get 125%. He's like, how can you get 125%?
Yeah.
Like, on my contact card, it has a space that says, do you know somebody else that could benefit from this information? And they
Yeah.
give me that. That's probably going to change, Mike, because the way the laws are changing, you're not going to be able to do that much longer. But I just thought of a way around, how can I get some extra names there? But
Sure.
uh, I'm right there with you. I'm an evangelist for technology. I mean, I give this talk to educators. I'm like, well, 3,000 years ago, the Greeks were complaining about writing. They're like, what? You can't memorize everything? Writing was the technology. In the
Yeah.
1840s, it was chalkboards. In the When Thomas Edison invented movies, oh, kids will never come to school because of movies. And then it was radio and television and computers. And then it was social media, and now it's AI. It's always going to be something,
Yeah. It'll always
and
be something. I agree.
you have to embrace it. Like, yeah, there's evil things you can do with it, but I if you look at the history of the world, good always triumphs over evil. So let's figure out on the positive ways to use these things.
So that's amazing. Now, two things. In your story, in your expert story, as soon as you called it the crossed X metal thing, I knew you were in trouble with the tire. Just so you know, because I don't know what that thing is either, but we should know, right? Um, but also, as I'm listening, I'm like, that's the best expert story that you told after, which is, I was happy with my 50%. As I imagine when I said it, people were like, that's not bad. And then you raise the ante to 100%, which also sounded great. And it's an expert that keeps thinking about the problem and finds a
Good.
way to now get 125 because you're just deep. You've done it 100 times, and you probably look out and you're like, I bet I could put cards out there. And then you do that, and you go, I wonder if I could do a referral thing on that. And it's the iterations about learning, being in a space for a long time. They're just really magical, and just you had some really great. That was a great story. Got me pumped up to try to go back and make that webinar better. Um, so maybe so as a final thought here, tell me about kind of what's coming up next for you and what you're thinking about through the end of 2025 here.
I'm really excited. We've been expanding our coaching services. So we used to really just get like 14 strangers in a room and we'd work on their presentations. But then the more we work with lots of different companies, they're not excited about their company secrets being revealed to 13 strangers in a room. And so now a lot of companies just bring us to them.
Well, man, what a treat to have you on here today. So if people are wondering to themselves, maybe I'm that company that wants to have you in, what is the way to easily best find Danny Brassell?
Well, as a thank you to you, Mike, and your audience for having to listen to me, I wanted to give everybody a freebie. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, again, freestoryguide.com, guide like a tour guide, I'm going to give everybody their own well-crafted story blueprint. What this it's actually the process we take our clients through on how to create their own well-crafted stories. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of putting together a presentation and shows you the research-based techniques on why you should put this in this section of your presentation. And what this means for you is the peace of mind that you don't have to worry about earning more income, getting more freedom, or having that impact. It's already embedded in the presentations you created. You can get all of that at freestoryguide.com. And Mike, this has just been a treat just getting to see you again. And I love everything that you're doing. And we're going to work together because I will definitely get you a higher number than 50% of those people
Fantastic.
coming through.
Fantastic. Well, I hope everyone gets a freestoryguide.com, burned into the brains and goes and checks it out. It's really cool. It's a great structure, and reach out to Danny to help improve it. And my measly little 50%, we're going to get up to 130% because I want to beat 125 number. But everyone, thanks for listening. If you think you got something out of it and it's not too much trouble, and subscribe and like, and you'll hear more about these conversations in the future. Thanks for listening to the Digital Transformist. This is Mike LaVista, and if you like that content, subscribe so you can get notified of new content when it comes out.